In the silent expanse of space where stars twinkled against the endless void, the galactic empire's might was unchallenged, its reach limitless. Sprawling across countless systems, this dominion had subdued worlds and civilizations with an iron grip that had never been questioned, until today. On the bridge of the Defiant, a ship as resilient as the spirits of those it carried, Commander Jake Warner stood resolute. His gaze was fixed on the vast canvas of space ahead, a scene punctuated by the distant glow of celestial bodies and the quiet darkness between them. This was not just another patrol on the fringes of human-occupied space. It was the eve of something unprecedented. The tranquility was abruptly shattered by a transmission that crackled through the communication array, a message from the heart of the Empire itself. The voice that came over the system was cold, calculated, devoid of any warmth. We, the rulers of the Galactic Empire, decree a challenge to the species known as humans. The message began, its tone condescending. Prove your worth in combat or be forever marked as cowards. Around Warner, the crew tensed, their previous calmness replaced by a palpable tension that filled the room. The commander's jaw tightened, but his response was measured, a testament to his experience. Chart a course to the Rigel system, Warner ordered, his voice steady. We will not let this go unanswered. As the coordinates were set and the ship hummed with the restrained power of its engines, not the usual thrum, but a silent surge of energy propelling them forward, the crew prepared for what lay ahead. The stars outside seemed to streak as they entered faster than light travel, the universe itself bending around them. Commander Warner moved away from the main console to stand beside his second-in-command, Lieutenant Harris, a man whose presence was always reassuring but never overshadowing. Together, they reviewed the data on the Empire's forces. They expect us to falter, to fail, Warner mused aloud, more to himself than to Harris. Harris nodded, his expression grim. They see us as lesser beings, easy to conquer, but we've faced giants before. Exactly, Warner affirmed, his eyes returning to the view outside. Prepare the men, Lieutenant. Training drills at 0600 hours. Every moment from now until we reach the Rigel system is precious. The challenge had been set, and with it, the wheels of war began to turn. Humanity might have been underestimated by the galaxy's reigning power, but Warner knew something the Empire did not. Underestimating the human spirit was a critical error, one that could very well be their undoing. As the Defiant cut through the cosmos toward its destination, the silence of space enveloping them, the crew did not need the roar of engines or the scent of ozone to feel the gravity of their mission. They were ready, fueled by a cause that was now their own. This was more than a response to a taunt. It was a declaration of humanity's place in the universe. And so, with a course set and a ship braced for the unknown, the saga of the American nightmare began. On a ship named for defiance, among stars that bore witness to eons of silence, a new chapter was about to be written, one that might just redefine the galaxy's understanding of courage and resolve. As the Defiant streaked through the cold expanse towards the Rigel system, the tension aboard thickened palpably. Commander Jake Warner, with every fiber of his being braced for the inevitable, watched as distant stars blurred into lines of white against the black canvas outside the panoramic bridge windows. His crew, a mosaic of determination and anxiety, busied themselves at their stations, each movement precise, betraying neither doubt nor fear. Lieutenant Harris monitored the tactical displays, his fingers gliding over the lit panels with practiced ease. The soft clicks of buttons being pressed and the low murmur of whispered confirmations between crew members filled the air, punctuated occasionally by the sharp, clear directives from their commander. "Status report," Warner's voice cut through the murmurs, as sharp and direct as the man himself. "All systems optimal. Course steady," Harris responded, his gaze never leaving the screens. "We'll reach the outer boundaries of the Rigel system in less than 3 hours." Warner nodded, his eyes narrowing slightly. The weight of command lay heavy on his shoulders, the responsibility clear in his firm posture and the set line of his mouth. He turned to gaze out at the void, his reflection in the glass, a ghostly overlay on the streaks of starlight. The silence of space pressed against the hull, an ever-present reminder of the vacuum beyond. In the mess hall, the crew gathered in small clusters, their low conversations a blend of strategy and speculation. The scent of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the underlying tang of metal and electricity, a smell unique to spaceship interiors, hung in the air. Sergeant Knox, a seasoned veteran known for his unshakable calm, leaned against a bulkhead, his deep voice barely above a whisper as he spoke with a group of younger soldiers. "We're not just any crew," he was saying, the confidence in his tone bolstering the resolve of those around him. "We're trained for exactly this kind of mission. Remember, it's not just about strength. It's about outsmarting them." The soldiers nodded, absorbing his words with the seriousness they demanded. The taste of strong coffee lingered on their tongues, a bitter comfort in the uncertain hours ahead. Back on the bridge, Warner returned to the central console, his hand brushing over the cold, smooth surface of the navigation panel. He took a deep breath, the air crisp and recycled, yet somehow invigorating as it filled his lungs. "Prepare all hands for a briefing," he instructed Harris, his voice resonant in the quiet of the bridge. "I want everyone sharp and clear on the plan. We're not going to meet their challenge. We're going to redefine it." As the crew assembled, Warner's gaze swept over them, each face reflecting a spectrum of resolve and apprehension. His address was concise, each word delivered with the precision of a man who knew the power of language. "This isn't just about survival or pride," he declared, his eyes locking with those of his crew. "It's about proving that underestimating us is their gravest mistake. We are not the underdogs in this fight. We are the architects of their surprise." With the crew's morale fortified, the Defiant continued its silent charge through the stars, a solitary sentinel approaching the theater of war, ready to unleash the full force of human ingenuity and spirit. The game was set, and humanity was not just playing, it was rewriting the rules. As the Defiant neared the edge of the Rigel system, the black of space deepened, resembling the dark waters of an unfathomable ocean. The stars appeared as distant lighthouses, guiding the ship through the cosmic sea toward an inevitable confrontation. Commander Jake Warner, standing at the bridge's viewport, watched as the first pale light of Rigel's suns pierced the darkness, bathing the bridge in a cold, ethereal glow. "Visual on the Rigel boundary markers," announced Ensign Rowe, his voice steady but tinged with the underlying current of anticipation that had gripped the entire crew. The boundary markers, floating buoys emitting a soft, pulsating light, served as silent sentinels marking the entrance to a realm where few had dared tread uninvited. Warner's reflection in the viewport melded with the stars beyond, his features etched with the gravity of their mission. He turned from the window, his movements deliberate, each step resonating softly against the metal deck. The taste of the ship's recycled air, tinged with a hint of artificial mint, was a constant reminder of the void that cradled them. In the galley, the crew's murmured discussions filled the compact space, the aroma of synthetic protein rich in the air, a makeshift comfort against the gnawing uncertainty. Sergeant Knox, his presence like a bastion among the younger crew, caught Warner's eye as he entered. "Everything's set, Commander," Knox reported, his voice a low rumble, akin to distant thunder. "Morale's high. They're ready to face whatever's out there." Warner nodded, his gaze sweeping over his crew. "Let's keep it that way. Ensure everyone's sharp and focused. No room for errors." The briefing room was abuzz with the last-minute checks and strategic updates. Maps of the Rigel system were displayed holographically in the center of the room, the topography of planets and moons rendered in striking detail. Warner and Harris stood before the holograms, plotting courses and potential skirmish sites. "We'll use the moon's gravitational pull for a slingshot maneuver," Harris suggested, pointing to a moon that orbited Rigel's third planet. "It'll give us the speed boost we need to surprise them." Warner considered the suggestion, his eyes reflecting the holographic light. "Do it," he confirmed, the words slicing through the hum of conversation like a blade. "It's unexpected. The Empire won't see it coming." As the crew dispersed to their posts, the scent of ozone, created by the ship's high-energy operations, filled the room, a sharp reminder of the technology that coursed through the Defiant's veins. Warner's boots echoed in the now quiet corridor as he made his way back to the bridge. Each step was a drumbeat to battle, a rhythm that matched the racing pulse of his crew. Alone now at the viewport, Warner watched as Rigel grew larger, its light casting long shadows behind him. He could almost feel the heat from the distant suns, a stark contrast to the chill that had settled in his bones. "This is more than just a skirmish," he whispered to the stars, as if they held the secrets of the impending battle. "It's a test of our very resolve." Behind him, the ship thrummed quietly with life, not with sound, but with the collective breaths of those who called it home. As the Defiant crossed the boundary into the Rigel system, it did so not as an intruder, but as a challenger stepping into the arena, its crew united by a single unspoken belief: the greater the challenge, the greater the triumph. The silence of space was their herald, and as they advanced, it was not into darkness, but towards a new dawn that they moved, one that promised either victory or oblivion. With the decoys deployed and the enemy momentarily distracted, Commander Jake Warner seized the opportunity for a tactical retreat to the shadow of a nearby asteroid. The Defiant glided silently through space, its movements precise, almost predatory. From the bridge, Warner watched the star-studded void, his face bathed in the soft glow of the navigation screens, reflecting the myriad points of light outside. "Reposition successful, sir. We're now hidden from their primary sensors," Lieutenant Harris reported, his voice a controlled murmur that matched the quiet intensity of the bridge. His fingers danced over the console, adjusting their cloak to match the electromagnetic signature of the asteroid. Warner's eyes didn't waver from the viewport, where the distant sun cast a pale, ghostly light over the asteroid's craggy surface. The cold beauty of it was stark, almost serene, but the taste of lingering danger was metallic against his tongue, a reminder of the bitter tang of war. In the mess hall, the crew's nerves were taut, the air thick with the scent of stale coffee and anxiety. Sergeant Knox, his demeanor unflinchingly calm, moved among them, his low tones barely audible over the soft clatter of utensils and the subdued whispers of the soldiers. "Stay sharp. This lull is just the calm before the storm," he cautioned, his gaze piercing as he scanned the room, making eye contact with each of his men. They nodded, absorbing his tacit strength. Meanwhile, Warner returned to his strategic contemplations, the weight of command pressing down on him like the deep cold of space pressing against the hull. "Harris, initiate a passive scan of the enemy formation. I want to know where they're weakest," he ordered without turning, his voice resonant with authority. The bridge fell into a focused silence, the only sounds the subtle clicking of keys and the soft sigh of air recycling through the vents. The scent of electricity charged the atmosphere, a sharp contrast to the visual calm outside. As Harris relayed the scan results, a map of the enemy's positions came alive on the screen in front of them, each ship a node in a complex web of tactical possibilities. Warner's finger traced lines across the screen, plotting potential vectors of attack. "Their rear guard is thinner. They're focused on the decoy fleet's last known trajectory," Harris pointed out, tapping a section of the display where the enemy ships were more sparsely distributed. A slight smile touched Warner's lips, his strategy crystallizing. "Prepare to break cloak and engage at my command. Target their propulsion systems. If we clip their wings, they can't surround us." The crew tensed, readying themselves for the order that would plunge them back into battle. The soft whir of the ship adjusting its position was like the deep breath before a plunge. Warner's gaze hardened as he finalized his plan, the calm before the storm palpable in the air. "On my mark," he said, his voice low, almost blending with the subtle vibrations of the ship. The anticipation built, a tangible force that filled the bridge and pulsed through the Defiant. Every sensor, every screen, every eye was fixed on the target, waiting for the moment of revelation, the point where strategy met chaos. As the Defiant readied itself to strike from the shadows, Warner knew this was the pivot on which the war would turn. The mystery of their fate, hidden in the maneuvers of war, was about to unfold, and the stakes were nothing less than the destiny of humanity. The moment stretched thin, the weight of inevitability pressing down on every man aboard the Defiant. The tactical display flickered with the enemy's positioning. Ships spread across the void like a steel web, oblivious to the predator lurking just beyond their sensors. Commander Jake Warner's gaze locked onto the formation's weakest link, where the enemy's rear guard lagged behind the main fleet. The digital readout traced their movements, slow, methodical, confident in their overwhelming numbers. "Mark," Warner ordered, his voice cutting through the silent anticipation. The Defiant erupted from the asteroid's shadow like a blade drawn from its sheath, slicing through the void in a calculated surge. The ship's thrusters flared against the darkness, a controlled burst of momentum that sent them hurtling toward the exposed enemy flank. The first salvo struck before the Empire's fleet registered the attack. Explosions bloomed in the abyss, debris scattering like shattered glass across the tactical display. The targeted cruisers reeled, propulsion systems crippled in an instant. "Direct hits on 3 vessels," Harris confirmed, his fingers flying across the console. "They're scrambling, but their formation's broken." A moment of raw, electric satisfaction surged through the bridge, but Warner didn't allow it to settle. "Shift to secondary targets. Keep them staggered." The Defiant twisted mid-flight, thrusters adjusting course with pinpoint precision. Another volley launched, streaking through space before detonating against an unprepared destroyer. Flames belched from its side, a silent eruption of chaos and wreckage spiraling into the void. The enemy fleet responded with a frenzied counterattack. Blazing arcs of plasma fire streaked toward the Defiant, illuminating the bridge in bursts of orange and violet as the ship weaved through the barrage. "Shields holding at 63%, Ensign Rowe called out, tension coiling in his voice. Warner's grip tightened around the armrest of his chair, knuckles pressing against the fabric. "Maintain the assault. Keep their focus split." The Defiant dove, its hull skimming the gravitational pull of a shattered moon, using the celestial wreckage as both cover and leverage. The tactical advantage was razor-thin, but Warner played it like a gambler with nothing to lose. In the barracks, Sergeant Knox strapped into position, his squad securing their weapons. The scent of scorched metal lingered in the confined space, mingling with the faint bite of recycled air. Knox checked his sidearm, the grip worn smooth from years of battle. "We deploying, sir?" one of his men asked, voice clipped with anticipation. "Not yet," Knox responded, "but we will." Warner's mind raced ahead, analyzing every trajectory, every possible move. The enemy hadn't committed their full force yet. That meant something bigger loomed just beyond their perception. A trap, perhaps, or worse, something unseen. The uncertainty gnawed at the edges of his thoughts, but there was no time to dwell on speculation. "Commander, incoming transmission," Harris said, his brow furrowed as he scanned the encrypted signal. "It's not from the Empire." Warner's eyes flicked to the screen. "Patch it through." As the bridge fell silent, a new voice filled the Defiant's comms, a voice neither human nor imperial, cold, measured, waiting, and then it spoke. The transmission crackled to life, filling the bridge with a sound that sent a shiver through the room. It wasn't the usual distortion of an encrypted channel. It was something deeper, layered, like a voice speaking through shattered glass. "Human vessel." The tone was detached, emotionless, yet carrying an unmistakable weight. "You are interfering in matters beyond your comprehension." Warner exchanged a glance with Harris, the lieutenant's jaw tightening. Every set of eyes on the bridge remained locked on the screen, where no face accompanied the transmission, only the pulsing, rhythmic distortion of an unknown signal. "Identify yourself," Warner said, his voice steady, measured. Silence. Then, "Withdraw." The command was not a threat. It was a certainty, spoken with the authority of something that had no need for warnings. A flicker ran through Warner's thoughts. This wasn't the Empire. This wasn't a demand for surrender or a proclamation of superiority. This was something else, something that had been watching. "Source of transmission?" he asked. Harris worked the console, fingers moving swiftly. "Unknown. It's bouncing off every major relay in the system. This isn't coming from a ship. This is being broadcast from somewhere deeper. A ripple of unease passed through the crew. The tactical screen still showed the chaos of battle. Flashes of enemy fire, crippled Imperial vessels struggling to regroup. But this signal, this voice, cut through the noise with an authority even the Empire lacked. Warner leaned forward, his fingertips brushing against the cold metal of the console. "If you have something to say it," he challenged. The voice shifted, as if adjusting, recalibrating its presence. "Your war is insignificant. Your defiance is noted. Do not interfere." The Defiant rocked as an Imperial battleship unleashed another barrage, forcing Warner back into the immediacy of combat. "Harris, cut the transmission," he ordered, turning to the tactical display. "We deal with one threat at a time." The eerie voice cut off, leaving an unnatural stillness in its wake. No one spoke of it, but the unease remained. "Enemy fleet adjusting course," Harris reported, his previous composure stiffened by whatever they had just heard. "They're pulling back, forming a tighter wedge around their capital ship." Warner studied the shifting formations, his mind sifting through the pieces. The enemy had them outnumbered, but they weren't pressing the attack. The message, the tactical change, it wasn't a coincidence. Sergeant Knox's voice came through the comm. "Commander, we're in position for boarding operations. Say the word." Warner's fingers hovered over the console. A direct assault had been the plan, but now, with an unseen entity watching from the shadows, a new question gnawed at him. Who else was playing this game? He exhaled, the weight of decision heavy in his chest. "Knox, hold position. We adapt to the unknown." The battle still raged beyond the hull, but the war had just changed. And somewhere in the void, something was watching. The void stretched endlessly beyond the Defiant, a battlefield suspended in silence. Debris drifted, the jagged remnants of shattered Imperial vessels spinning aimlessly, illuminated by the flickering fire of their own wreckage. Yet amidst the chaos, the enemy had halted their advance. The Empire never retreated without reason. Warner stood motionless, his stare fixed on the tactical display, where the enemy fleet had tightened their ranks, shielding their capital ship like a wall of steel. Their movements were defensive, hesitant. "They're stalling," Harris murmured, reading the same patterns. "They should be pressing their advantage." Warner's fingers curled against the console. "No," he corrected, his voice quiet but firm. "They're waiting." For what? The cryptic transmission still lingered in his thoughts, wrapping around his mind like a cold chain. "Your defiance is noted. Do not interfere." The voice had spoken with a certainty that unsettled him more than any fleet ever could. Something had taken notice of them, something watching from a vantage they couldn't see. A deep vibration passed through the ship's frame. Not an impact, not enemy fire. It was as if space itself had tensed around them. Harris turned sharply. "Commander, I just picked up a gravitational anomaly. Deep field. It's faint, but it wasn't there a minute ago." "Show me," Warner ordered. The screen shifted, data streams shifting into visual renderings. At first, nothing, just the star-speckled abyss. Then a distortion, a ripple in space, a wound in the black fabric of the void. "That's not natural," Rowe whispered, his throat dry. A slow inhale passed through Warner's teeth. The anomaly pulsed, warping light around its edges. No signatures, no comm signals, just the undeniable presence of something. "Knox, status?" Warner's voice came through the comm, more clipped than before. "Still holding, sir," came the sergeant's response. "Imperials are keeping their distance, like they're waiting for a green light." Warner's pulse matched the steady blinking of the display. He could feel it, a shift, like standing on unstable ground before an avalanche. "We need more data," Harris said, half to himself, fingers moving rapidly across the controls. "I'm running an active scan." The moment the pulse was sent, the distortion reacted. A wave of gravitational force surged outward, rolling through the void like an unseen tide. The Defiant lurched, systems flickering under the stress. "Shields are destabilizing," Rowe shouted. "Shut down the scan," Warner snapped. The display flickered back to normal, but the damage was done. A new presence materialized within the anomaly, a shape barely distinguishable against the cosmic abyss. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't anything Warner had ever seen before. It didn't belong to the Empire. It didn't belong to anyone. It had been waiting. The Empire had stalled for a reason. And now Warner understood why. The thing in the void did not move. It did not broadcast a signal. It simply existed, wrongly, impossibly, against the backdrop of space. Warner felt its presence before his mind could fully process its shape. It wasn't a ship, at least not by any standard definition. No metal hull gleamed under starlight. No running lights betrayed a propulsion system. It was a void within a void, a wound carved into existence, its edges shifting in ways that defied physics. "Commander," Harris's voice had lost its usual composure. I don't know what I'm looking at." Warner's grip on the console tightened, his knuckles paling. "Ro, any readings?" "Negative. It's absorbing everything, light, energy, even our sensors." Ro's breath came fast, his fingers hovering uncertainly over his controls. "I don't even know if it's solid." On the tactical screen, the Empire's fleet remained in position, unmoving. Not a single shot fired. Their hesitation, their stalled formation, it had never been about Defiant. They'd been waiting for this. Knox's voice crackled over the comms. "Sir, what the hell is that?" The sergeant rarely sounded rattled. Now he did. "We're about to find out," Warner muttered. The shape flickered, shifting like something submerged in deep water. Then, without warning, an arc of violet energy lashed out from its core. It wasn't a weapon, not in any way Warner had seen before. There was no heat signature, no residual ionization, just absence. A lance of sheer nothingness carved through space. The Empire's nearest warship took the full impact. No explosion, no fire. It was simply erased, its matter peeling away into fragments that disintegrated before they could scatter. A silence more oppressive than any explosion followed. Harris exhaled sharply, as though he'd been holding his breath. "It didn't destroy it," he said in disbelief. "It unmade it." The remaining Empire ships reacted instantly, peeling away, their formations breaking as they attempted to flee. Their arrogance, their certainty, they were gone. They no longer sought to fight. They sought to survive. A chill settled over Warner's spine. Whatever this was, the Empire feared it. That made it far worse than anything he had prepared for. "Commander," Harris said, voice lower now, edged with something dangerous. "We need to leave." Warner didn't respond immediately. His instincts screamed the same thing, but something held him in place. The transmission from earlier. The warning. "Your war is insignificant. Do not interfere." This wasn't about humans or the Empire. This was bigger. The galaxy was a chessboard, and they had just glimpsed a player beyond comprehension. Another pulse rippled from the entity. This time Warner felt it inside him like an earthquake beneath his ribs. He forced himself to remain standing, his teeth clenched. "Knox, recall your men. Now." "Aye, sir." The Defiant's engines roared as Warner turned his back on the abyss. This fight no longer belonged to them. The Defiant veered away from the entity, breaking through the debris field as if fleeing the jaws of something that had never been meant to be seen. Warner gripped the command console, his mind parsing through fragmented observations, forcing logic onto something that defied explanation. The anomaly hadn't just destroyed that Imperial ship, it had erased it. The matter had unraveled, dissipating into the void like it had never existed. "Report!" Warner barked, forcing his voice steady. Harris's fingers flew across the console, his face pale but composed. "Engines holding. No direct contact with the energy field, but our shields are destabilizing. Whatever that thing is, it's affecting space itself." Ro's throat bobbed as he swallowed. "The Empire's fleet isn't regrouping. They're scattering. They're running." The tactical display confirmed it. The once imposing fleet had broken into disorder, individual ships accelerating in every direction, abandoning their formations. Their warships, superior in both numbers and firepower, had chosen flight over retaliation. Warner pressed his fingers to his temple, trying to think beyond the immediate crisis. The Empire didn't retreat. Not for humanity. Not for anyone. But they weren't just retreating. They were escaping. Knox's voice cut through the comms. "We're all accounted for, but sir, what the hell did we just see?" Warner exhaled slowly, his mind still grasping for an answer. Something the Empire feared enough to forget about us completely. The shape in the void hadn't pursued them. It had simply remained, shifting at the edge of perception, waiting. Ro's console flared red. "Commander, new reading. The anomaly. It's expanding." Warner's head snapped toward the viewport. Where once there had been a single void-like entity, the darkness had begun to stretch, its edges rippling outward. Space bent around it, distorting light, warping reality itself. Harris whispered, "It's not just there. It's spreading." A deep vibration rattled the ship's hull, a sensation felt more in bone than flesh. It wasn't just gravitational force. It was something more fundamental, like space itself was shifting. "Ro, full power to engines. Now," Warner ordered. The Defiant surged forward, tearing through the battlefield, leaving the anomaly behind. Warner didn't need to tell his crew not to look back. He already knew the sight of it would be burned into their minds forever. Harris scanned the displays, his expression grim. "Even at full speed, we're still within range of whatever it's doing. If it expands too fast, we won't outrun it," Warner finished. For the first time, he understood the full scale of what they were up against. This wasn't a weapon. It wasn't an enemy fleet. It was something far worse, something ancient, something that neither the Empire nor humanity could control. And it had finally noticed them. The Defiant sped through the void, its hull vibrating with the strain of the sudden retreat. The anomaly behind them was expanding, devouring light and distorting space itself. Warner's mind worked in overdrive, filtering through possibilities, discarding anything that relied on assumptions. They had no precedent for this, no records, no science to explain what they had just seen. Only the raw fact that the Empire, the single most dominant force in the galaxy, had fled in terror. He turned to Harris, his voice sharp. "Options, now." Harris's eyes flicked between screens, fingers moving rapidly across the controls. "A direct escape won't work. It's expanding too fast. If the gravitational field keeps spreading at this rate, we'll get pulled into it, even at max velocity. Then we stop running," Warner decided. "We maneuver." A murmur ran through the bridge. Ro hesitated. "Sir, are you saying we—" "I'm saying we use what we do understand," Warner cut in, already stepping toward the central navigation display. "This thing is disrupting space, but it's still following some kind of pattern. It hasn't pulled us in yet. That means it has a limit." He gestured at the map of the sector. "If we can predict its rate of expansion, we can angle our trajectory along the edge of its influence. Ride the momentum instead of fighting against it." Harris's brows furrowed. "Like using a gravity assist?" "Exactly," Warner confirmed. "If we approach at the right vector, we use its pull to slingshot out instead of getting swallowed." Knox's voice came through the comms. "That's a hell of a gamble, Commander." "Everything's a gamble right now," Warner replied. "This is the best shot we have." Harris recalculated, tracing the theoretical trajectory with precision. "If we execute this right, we come out the other side with enough momentum to reach the nearest neutral system in record time. If we don't, we won't be around to discuss it," Warner finished. He exhaled slowly, then nodded. "Prep the ship. This has to be perfect." The crew moved with a newfound focus. The nervous tension that had gripped them before was now channeled into precision. Every adjustment to the ship's thrusters, every minor recalibration to the stabilizers, was executed with a technician's eye for detail. "Course locked in," Ro confirmed. 10 seconds to maneuver point." The Defiant tilted, aligning its nose toward the abyss's edge, the distortion already pulling at the ship's structure. Warner kept his stance firm as the gravity shift tugged at his balance. 5 seconds. Warner gripped the command console. "All stations, brace." The ship bucked violently as it met the event horizon's pull, an unseen force grabbing hold, dragging them toward the chasm. Then, at the precise, calculated moment, Harris fired the auxiliary thrusters. The Defiant twisted. the gravitational pull bending around its hull like an invisible current. For a breathless instant, everything held. Then, with a force like a slingshot released, the Defiant was flung free. The void fell away behind them. They had made it, but Warner knew whatever they had just escaped from wasn't finished with them yet. The Defiant tore through the void, momentum carrying it at velocities no ship should endure. The gravitational slingshot had worked, hurling them past the event horizon's reach, but now Warner had a different problem: deceleration. The ship rattled violently, inertia pressing the crew into their restraints. Lights flickered, warning indicators flashing red across every console. Harris's knuckles whitened against the controls, his focus razor-sharp. "Stabilizers are straining against the velocity," Harris reported, voice clipped. "If we don't slow down, we'll overshoot our target and drift into uncharted space." Warner didn't hesitate. "Reverse thrusters in staggered bursts. We slow down without snapping the hull apart." Rowe's fingers danced over the controls. "A full burn will tear us in half. I'll time the pulses manually." "Do it," Warner ordered. The ship lurched as Rowe fired the reverse thrusters in rapid, calculated intervals. The force jerked Warner forward, his harness digging into his chest. The Defiant groaned in protest, but the velocity meter began to drop. Knox's voice crackled over the comms. "That thing still behind us?" Harris ran a scan, his face tightening. "The anomaly hasn't moved, but its expansion has slowed. It's like it only reacted when we got too close." Warner absorbed that detail, filing it away. "Meaning we triggered something." No one responded, but the weight of the truth pressed into the room. Whatever they had escaped wasn't random. It had reacted to them, studied them, and now it had stopped. But why? The ship's speed finally dropped within safe parameters, and the straining hull settled. Warner exhaled, rubbing the bridge of his nose before turning to Harris. "Damage assessment." Harris scanned the reports. "Superficial exterior stress, but nothing critical. Shields are recharging. We've burned through more fuel than expected, though." Warner leaned over the nav table. A three-dimensional map of the sector flickered into view, displaying their new coordinates. "We can't go back to known space yet," he said. "We need to assume the Empire will spin this as a cover-up. They'll deny everything, maybe even claim we attacked first." Knox's voice cut in. "So what's the plan, Commander? We go dark?" Warner traced a vector across the map. "We head to a neutral system, one with independent observation stations. We need proof. If we're the only ones who saw what happened, then as far as the rest of the galaxy is concerned, it didn't." Harris nodded. "And if the Empire gets to them first?" Warner's jaw clenched. "Then we make sure we get there before they do." The Defiant adjusted course, cutting through the dark like a blade. The battle was over, but the real fight had just begun. As the crew settled, Warner stared at the distant stars, his mind turning over every possibility. He knew one thing for certain. Whatever that entity was, it had let them go. And that meant it had something far worse planned. The Defiant surged through the void, the aftershock of what they had encountered still pulsing in Warner's chest. He stood rigid, eyes locked on the star chart, watching their trajectory unfold. The Empire would not let them vanish quietly. The second they re-emerged into known space, they would be hunted, not for what they had done, but for what they now knew. Harris adjusted the navigation console. "Approaching the neutral sector. No sign of Imperial pursuit, yet." "Doesn't mean they aren't coming," Warner muttered. His fingers curled against the metal railing. "The Empire won't risk us talking." Knox's voice carried through the comms. "Then let them come. They lost their nerve back there. They won't get it back before we make our move." Warner exhaled slowly. The sergeant wasn't wrong. The Empire had fled like frightened prey. But that wasn't the victory people would remember. No one outside this ship knew what had really happened. If they didn't control the narrative, the Empire would. And the first casualty of war was always the truth. Harris turned from his console. "Sir, if we do this, if we go public with what we saw, there's no turning back. The Empire won't just brand us as traitors. They'll erase us." Warner's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Then we make sure they can't." The tactical display flickered, projecting the neutral station ahead. A sprawling outpost, unaffiliated with any governing body. Its sensors would have recorded everything. That data was their only leverage. Rowe straightened in his seat. I'm getting comms traffic from the station. They want to know why a military vessel is coming in hot. Warner crossed the bridge, voice steady. Patch me through. The screen shifted, revealing an older man with piercing eyes and a skeptical expression. His uniform lacked any national insignia, marking him as a neutral observer. This is Director Sloan of Rigel Relay Station. Identify yourself. Commander Jake Warner, Defiant. His voice carried the weight of what they had endured. We have urgent intelligence, something neither you nor the Empire is prepared for. Sloan leaned back, unimpressed. And why should I believe a human warship that just fled a battle zone? Warner took a step closer to the feed, his expression carved from stone. Because the Empire ran before we did. Sloan hesitated. The words hung between them, sinking into the gravity of the moment. Harris murmured under his breath, "He's listening." Warner's voice sharpened. "Let us dock, review our records, see for yourself. Then decide if you want to sit in silence while the Empire buries this, or be the first to show the galaxy the truth." The screen remained static for several agonizing seconds. Then, finally, "You have docking clearance, but if this is a trick, you won't leave my station alive." Warner allowed himself a single nod. "Then let's hope you're ready to believe what's coming." As the station loomed closer, the weight of history pressed against them. Humanity had stepped into the unknown, faced something beyond comprehension. And now, the galaxy would know what happened when humans refused to kneel. The Defiant docked with a controlled shutter, clamps locking the ship into place. Beyond the airlock, Director Sloan and his security detail waited, their expressions wary, their weapons visible but not raised. Warner stepped through first, his boots striking the metal deck with measured confidence. His crew followed, their presence a silent testament to the weight of what they carried. Sloan crossed his arms. "You have 5 minutes to convince me this isn't a waste of my time." Warner met his stare without flinching. "You've seen Imperial fleets," he said. "You know how they operate. You've monitored their battles, watched them crush resistance without hesitation. But today, you saw something impossible." He let the words settle. The Empire ran. A flicker of uncertainty passed over Sloan's face, but he kept his stance firm. "A tactical retreat doesn't mean they abandoned their fleet," Warner cut in. "Not because of us. Not because of anything human. Because something in the void made them afraid." He gestured to Harris, who activated the holo display. The recording played. First, the battle. Then, the anomaly. The thing that had defied every law of war. Sloan's breath hitched. His guard stiffened. "We don't know what it is," Harris said quietly. "But we know what it did. It didn't destroy. It erased, like it was rewriting the fabric of space itself." Warner took a step closer. "And the Empire? They knew. They didn't try to fight it. They ran. That should tell you everything." Sloan's eyes flickered between the frozen image of the void's shifting mass and Warner's unshaken stare. "Why bring this to me? Why not return to your command?" Warner exhaled slowly. "Because the Empire won't admit they lost. They won't tell the galaxy that there's something out there even they fear. They'll bury this. They'll silence anyone who tries to speak." He squared his shoulders. "We're not here for permission. We're here to make sure the truth gets out before they erase us too." A long silence stretched between them. Sloan turned back to the recording, his fingers drumming against his forearm. When he spoke, it was slower. "If I transmit this, I make an enemy of the Empire." "You were already their enemy," Warner countered. "You just didn't know it yet." Sloan exhaled through his nose, then gave a single nod. "I'll send the feed to every independent relay in the outer systems. When this gets out, there'll be no stopping it." The weight of the moment pressed against the room. Knox shifted beside Warner, arms crossed. "And what happens to us when this breaks?" Warner's lips curled into a grim smile. That depends on how badly the Empire wants to pretend they're still in control. Sloane exhaled sharply. Then I hope you're ready for war. Warner's voice was steel. We were always ready. As the broadcast pulse surged across the stars, carrying the truth to the furthest reaches of the galaxy, one reality became unshakable. Humanity had been underestimated, and now the entire universe would pay for that mistake.